Well, good morning. I am so sorry that we had to start a little bit late. We've had a few technical difficulties, and I am slightly afraid that we might only have one panelist instead of two. We've been trying to get the other two to join, but like I mentioned, we've been having some technical difficulties. So if we're able to get them to join on as we go, then I will be adding them to the call. But we're going to go ahead and jump right on in. This
You're
is
stuck
Travel
with
Nurse.
me.
Yes. This is Travel Nurses Inc.'s virtual workshop about traveling with families, specifically about traveling with children. I am Anna Joy Tamayo, and I'm the community and PR manager at Travel Nurses Inc. And we are so excited to have you all joining today's workshop. Whether you're currently traveling with your children, or maybe you are thinking about traveling and you've got a family but not sure how to make it work, or if you are a current traveler and you're thinking about starting a family but not sure how to make that work logistically, hopefully today's workshop will answer some of your questions. So, the purpose of the discussion is to hear from different viewpoints. Ideally, we'll hear from about three different viewpoints, but if not, Christina is our CNO, and she has heard all of the stories, and I'm sure that she will be able to speak to a lot of different scenarios. But the key takeaway that we want you all to have is that there is no right or wrong way to travel with your children, and you have to do what's best for you and your family's situation. As we go along, feel free to drop in questions in the chat, and at the very end, we will do a Q&A session and try and answer all of the questions. So let's hear from Christina. We should have Christina, Jamaica Agiapong, and Tanisha Fagan Zoom Walt with us today, but like I mentioned, we're having some difficulties getting the others to join, so we've got Christina with us. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your Saturday to join us.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, would you mind
Technical difficulties are always a thing.
Exactly. Always,
Just
always a
roll with it.
thing. No matter how much you can prepare, no matter how many times you can try and like prepare, we probably ran through this two or three times, but something's gonna pop up the day of. It's just inevitable. Pretty sure it's like Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But Christina, would you mind introducing yourself? Um, Talk about when you started traveling and talk briefly about your experience traveling with your son.
Okay, my pleasure. So I'm Christina Duncan. I am our Chief Operating Officer as well as our Chief Nursing Officer for Travel Nurses Inc. I have been with the company for 15 years. Um, let's see, but I've been a nurse 30 plus years. I like to tell everybody I just come stop counting after that 30. I just add the plus. So for me, I'd like to kind of say I was a pioneer for traveling with children. My son is currently 28 years old. And when I did this, like I said, it was 25 years ago, and people didn't really travel with children back then. It was more, your single nurses, people that were, not in that season of life with children. So for me, it was kind of something that I was just, looking to do. I wanted to relocate. I wanted to try something different. And so I enlisted a friend that, I was going to take a summer, getaway, and enlisted a friend to go with me initially, to go out there and just kind of help me get my feet, into the space. And then once I did that, I was able to just, I think I said to you earlier, clinicians were resourceful. So I was able to find, before school care, after school care, things that I needed. I think the other important part, as clinicians, there's so many different specialties that you can get into as a nurse, that you can find what works for you so that you are able to still be, a parent, and still work and still travel and still, check all the boxes that you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about the support system that you had? And I don't want to speak for Tanisha and Jamaica, but they have told me a little bit about their situation. So I can tell the audience a little bit
Yes,
about their
please do.
situations. So Jamaica, she's been traveling for I want to say around 4 to 5 years, and she's been a CST. She's a surgical tech. She's been a CST for more than 10 years. I don't know specifically how many years, but she has 9 children, and she recently had her ninth child back in February, and she's been traveling. So um, she would
She
be able to
definitely has to
speak.
have a support system.
I was going to say she's got to have a support system. I know that her
Oh.
husband helps her a lot with her support. And then Tanisha, I actually spoke with her recently, and she started traveling about 5 years ago. She's also CST. She's been a CST for a while. And she started traveling pre-pandemic, so like around 2019.
Mhm.
Then the pandemic hit, and her children had to start homeschooling. Her kids are now 10 and 12 years old. She's got two boys. They're 10 and 12 years old. And so when the pandemic hit, she had to start homeschooling while she was traveling. And so she was homeschooling and traveling, and she talked to me about her support system that she had. And she enlisted the help of her mom and her mother-in-law. And those two women were crucial in supporting her. I
Mhm.
think that her mother-in-law has gone with her on a couple of assignments, or at least she's gone out to visit her on the assignments to help with her sons. And so, needless to say, it would be next to impossible to travel without some kind of support system. So, Christina, could you talk about your support system?
Absolutely. So for me, I was a single mom. So
Mhm.
again, blazing the trails of what's possible. So I have, I had family, in Memphis, that was obviously, a phone call away, with my support. When I got to my first travel location, I was completely blessed with some of the connections that I made. I immediately, lifelong friends, still friends of mine, made friends at the first location where it was an apartment that I was in. Um, and again, just kind of making those connections, and being able to have those people become instant support systems for me. Um, and like I said, you do what you have to do. You make it work. And I always like to share the story that, when I said that you can do different things, at one point I had decided to do a weekender position, which is not really as common of a thing right now. And so I had met this really, good friend. Her son and my son went to school together, and Austin would stay the weekend. I did a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And years later, Austin was little, so he didn't know. Years later, he would, said something, when I was talking about, oh, I'd go to work. And he was like, you were at work? He's like, I just thought you were the cool mom, letting me stay at my friends all weekend, but I did that so that I could be at home Monday through Friday and still be able to be like a school mom and do events and that kind of stuff. So there's all kind of things that you can do to, adjust of
Yeah.
what you want, how you
Yeah.
want that experience to go.
I love that. Kids are also so resilient. He
Yeah.
probably didn't even cross his
He
mind that
didn't
that's what
have
you're
a
doing.
clue that I was going to work and that I was working nights. I mean, he just knew that I was there in the morning to pick him up and, there all day long and,
Mm,
sleeping 3 hours at a time. So yeah, it
wow.
was, and again, if you want to do it, you can do it.
Yeah. I know I've also heard of travelers, like you said, being resourceful. I've heard of travelers, and once they have kids, until they get to be school age where they can like go to school and have
Mhm.
aftercare and before care. I've heard of a lot of travelers that will do like clinical positions, or if they're
Mhm.
an OR nurse, then they'll try and do 5/8s instead of
Mhm.
3/12s, and just
Mhm.
readjust their schedule so that it aligns better with daycare and who can take care of your
Mhm.
children, because a lot of daycare centers, they're not open for 12 hours.
No.
And so you've got to be able to find somebody to take care of
Mhm.
your children if
Mhm.
you're going to be on there if you're going to be working for 12 hours a day or night.
Right. Right.
So, well, great. And let's see here. How did you decide what assignments to take? I know you touched on it a little bit about how you're resourceful and you can change your assignments and really kind of make the assignment fit your needs at the moment. But how did you determine that based on like what childcare or what support you had? Was there anywhere that you were not willing to go until a certain point?
No, not for me. Not for me personally. For me, I was strictly looking for location.
Uh-huh.
I remember very vividly going to Barnes and Noble, and I had two or three locations that I really, and again, this was a long time ago that I did it. And I know our listeners probably would like our newer people, but for me, I just went and I got some books on some locations and travel places that I wanted to go, and I did just kind of rolled them out, pros and cons. And I looked at, schools, I looked at weather, I looked at, crime, I looked at, top hospitals. I was a pediatric ICU nurse. So I looked at a location that had you know, a good rating on a pediatric hospital. So, and that's how I chose it. And for me, the interesting part, I listen to all these people and they've traveled and they've done so many assignments and gone to so many places. I went to one, and when I went to Colorado, I ended up staying there. So I think that's another amazing thing that people can do. You can go and you can see different parts of the country and determine whether or not this may be some place that, you may want to relocate. And it was, for me, it was a fabulous place to raise my son.
Wow. And luckily now we've got perm placement jobs. And so if somebody does find somewhere that they really enjoy, we can possibly turn it into a permanent placement. And if they've got the support system or they've got like their pediatrician set up or the school set up or, whatever, that's a possibility now.
Yep. Lots of resources, lots of opportunities.
Yes, I think the big thing is resources and knowing where to find your resources, who to talk to, networking, things like that. Well, do you have any advice for any healthcare professionals that might be interested in traveling but not sure really how to get started with their children?
I think it goes back to what you said. There's resources. There are so many people. There's so many people, within your company, within our company that have done it and been successful at it. And just ask the questions. And to really not be afraid. It's all doable. I mean, I think we all, when we become parents, the first thing people says is, you can't really mess up, even though we're not given a book, to like, hey, the right and the wrong thing is, as long as you have those connections and you have that support system, you can do anything. You can make anything happen.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that you think that people really should consider before taking the leap of faith and starting to travel?
I think that, so for me in my journey, when I first started doing kind of the non-traditional staffing. So back in the day, it was, just our supplemental staffing. I did it locally and regionally. So I did not go very far from home. So I think it's always a good idea if you're going to try to maneuver that of not going so far away. Your first travel assignment needs to be somewhere close, somewhere that you can get home, somewhere that somebody can get to you, if needed, that support system. So I think my advice would be to, don't go too far away from where somebody could get to you and provide that support.
Yes. So start close to home. Get your bearings, figure out your system, figure out your rhythm, figure out what resources you need, figure out all of this stuff, and then slowly but surely start going a little bit farther and a little bit further and a little bit further. Another thing that I always recommended to my travelers is go somewhere where you've got friends or family. Like if you've got friends or family in Omaha, Nebraska, go to Omaha, Nebraska. If you've got a support system that's going to be out there to help you, you can go wherever you've got support. And that's the beauty of traveling is like,
absolutely,
you can see the world. You can see, not the world, you can see the country. You can see the country.
You can see the United States.
Yeah. And Alaska
Which
and
is a big
Hawaii.
world. Yeah.
and exactly in
Yeah.
DC.
Yeah.
You can really see it all. And if you've got family or friends somewhere, use your resources, know
Mhm.
your options, but definitely start out close to home and
Mhm.
then slowly expand. And that'll also
Absolutely.
build your confidence, I really think.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's trial and error. It's, you'll realize, oh, I didn't have, I didn't think about this, or so it's just kind of a trial and error.
Yeah, it's always an improving process.
Mhm.
You're never going to get it right the first time, and
Nope.
that's okay. And that's also why kids are so resilient. Children,
Mhm.
like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things that just go right over their brains,
Right over their head.
and they
A
don't even
lot.
notice
Nope.
it.
Not a bit.
Well, now we can start taking questions. I see that we've got one audience question, and someone asked, how do you balance having children of different ages and needs while traveling?
Well, that's a hard one for me because I only had one. So that's where Jamaica would really come in with her nine babies.
I
Um,
think
I, I would say that you would just again, um, research. You would, you've got every child comes with a different season and a different, um, a list of needs, and
yeah.
again, resources. Find out, your before care school for, programs for after school care.
Yeah.
Community rec stuff was huge for me. Um,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it gives them the capability to really get involved with lots of things.
Yeah, and I will say I can give a couple of anecdotal stories because I was a recruiter and so I did have a lot of travelers that had children. One specifically that I can think of, she was an OR nurse and she had two children. One was under the age of 5 because she wasn't in kindergarten yet, and the other one was school age, but he had autism. And so
Mm,
she and her husband had to readjust their schedules. Um, he he didn't quit his job, I don't believe, but he did stay home and help
mm,
take care of their daughter while their son went to school. And he was able to go and help with their son whenever, if he needed something at school. And she didn't go too far from home. She only went
right.
about 2 to 3 hours away from her home. So she
Mhm.
was back home at night. And I believe that he worked evenings. And so she worked during the day. And then he would work evenings. So she would get home, he'd take a nap, and then he would go to work in the evening and then come back. And they tag teamed it.
You make it
And
work.
exactly, you
You
make
make
it
it work.
work.
Hmm.
I think it's also important to remember that none of this is permanent. And that's the thing about traveling is that it can change from assignment to assignment. They're only 13 weeks long.
Yeah.
And so the
And you
situation
learn
could
from it.
change.
You learn
Exactly.
from it.
You
And if
you
it's
learn from
something that
it.
didn't work, then you do something different on your next one.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I've got a couple of other questions that have been submitted to me. Um, What would you suggest for someone who might be traveling with a child under the age of 1? Whenever you have a baby, they have to go in for weekly appointments at the beginning and then monthly appointments, and then it's like every 3 months. So if somebody's traveling with, say, an 8-month-old, how would you suggest them going about finding like a pediatrician and making sure that they're not missing any shots or anything like that?
Um, well, I think again, as clinicians, um, I'm going to say it again, we're resourceful. I think that, you can have, and you mentioned it a second ago, this is not permanent. So a
Mm,
13-week assignment, you can adjust your well baby visits, on, times that when you're going back home, right?
mhm.
So everybody knows that when you're traveling, you still have your home. So
Mhm.
I would think you would just schedule those kind of well visits around, you know, those, you know, times that you're going back and forth to your home
Yeah.
base.
Yeah. Okay, great. Another question that I've got is if you've got older kids, and you traveled when Austin was 5, so how do you make sure that they are still socializing with other kids and making friends and making sure that that's a priority?
Um, for me, I did different things when I first went out there. Austin is very much like me. He makes friends very easily. Um, and so for him, my situation was he was in before school care and then he
Mhm.
was in after school care. So he instantly was making friends at school. I didn't homeschool. He was, in a public school. And so he had those opportunities. And again, I was very blessed and very fortunate to, have made some just instant lifelong friends. I mean, and then, getting him involved in community, in, recreational sports, whatever it is that they're interested in. And then that just keeps them, you know, engaged and well socialized, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And how do you, so if you are a single mom, or maybe you're not a single mom, but you are working and you're working a lot, how do you prioritize that quality time with your children? Because it's very precious, and you mentioned this to me before the call, you don't get that time back. So how do you
Mhm,
prioritize the quality time with your children while working, while being a wife,
mhm.
while being a mom? How do you balance it all?
Hmm. Uh, you know what's most important. We all know it.
Hmm.
And you pour yourself into it.
Hmm.
For me, that's all I did was work and my son, work and my son.
Hmm.
I think the harder thing is to prioritize yourself. I think what we do as moms, and dads, parents in general, is that during that season when our children are young, we're full on.
Hmm.
And sometimes I think we forget to prioritize our self-care and our needs.
Yeah.
But for me, it was everything I ever loved, in life was being a nurse and being a mom. So it just was what I did. I was
Hmm.
able to do, like I said, I did weekenders so I could be school mom, I could be a room mom. So I think you just do what's best for you. You
Yes.
prioritize in the way that's best for you.
I love that. I think what the common things that I've heard are know your resources,
Hmm.
adjust your schedule.
Hmm.
Everything is temporary and can be changed.
Hmm.
Assignments are only 13 weeks long,
Hmm.
and just be adaptable to
Hmm.
your surroundings. Well, I have
Everything will be okay.
everything's going to be
Have fun.
okay.
Just have fun.
Yeah. And I will also add that I talked with Tanisha about this earlier when she was homeschooling her kids. She talked about how every assignment that she took, she used it as a learning opportunity. The kids
Mhm,
got to see the country. The kids got to see national landmarks. They got to
mhm.
go to, national parks. They got to see wildlife. They got to do all of these things that, like, when I was growing up, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. I was not going to Yellowstone when I was in third grade, you know?
I'm sorry.
It wasn't in the budget.
No, no.
So I mean, you can be teaching your kids, and everything can be a learning opportunity. And I know that, like, so I spoke with Tanisha last weekend, and last weekend she was taking her kids to go to the Redwoods, and she
Mhm,
was with her mother-in-law. And so she was using it as a learning opportunity to spend that quality time with her kids because
mhm,
she's working during the week, they're in school during the week. And so I think in a lot of ways, it's a lot like how it would be if you weren't traveling, you
mhm.
know? Because your schedule's your schedule. You're either going to be working 3 12s, 4 10s, 5 8s, regardless, and you're going to have your kids regardless. So whether you're traveling or your staff, you've got to figure out how to find that time to
Mhm.
prioritize your kids
Yeah.
regardless. So,
Well, and I'm gonna, this just came to me as we were talking. It it goes one step further. So for me, doing that when my son was 5 to now him being 28, I have
mm,
seen things that I instilled in him as a traveler that has come to fruition in his life. He's currently living in Portland, Oregon. He's on the coast. He's doing, he's moved here, he's moved there. And it was one of those things when he was first leaving the nest. And I'm like, why are you leaving home? And he was like, Mom, this is what you taught me to do. And so it gives them, it provides them that sense of, autonomy and independence that they're able to then go, hey, it's not so scary to take that leap of faith. My mom did
Yeah.
it.
You can look back and be like, wow, I've raised such a well-rounded child.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not, it's not scared to, you know, take a leap of faith.
Yeah. Well, I've got one last question. So, children are germ carriers and they are constantly getting sick. How do you manage whenever your child gets sick and say you need to call in or something like that? How do you manage that while being a traveler?
Oh, that's a hard one. Um, I look back on some of the things that I did, and you know, I trusted a lot of people, and I know things are different nowadays. Where, like I said, you as a single mom, you do what you have to do, and it's not always ideal. And I'm not saying that I recommend that, but I also was one who didn't believe in calling in, so if I had a shift and I had a schedule, then I was going to find a neighbor or I was going to find a friend that I had, made a connection with.
Yeah.
Some hospitals, back in the day, they would have, places where you could take your kids when they're sick. They don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
So again, I think that's just having your resource, having something already set up that that you can have somebody that will come in um, and be there for your child, take care of them because you've got to go to work.
Yeah. I know something else that we like to tell our travelers is that if you do have to call in, because there are some times where you can't find somebody in time, if you do have to call in, try and make up that shift
Oh,
later on in the
absolutely.
week. There are 7 days in a week. And so so always just try and make up the shift. If you have to call in, the facility is going to be much more appreciative if you try and make up that shift later on in the week. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah. Well, that is about all the time that we've got, Christina. Thank you so much and for being so flexible. And thank you everybody for joining us on this Saturday. And before you all leave, if you think of something that you would like for us to discuss in the future on a future virtual workshop, feel free to drop it in the chat and I will be compiling all of those and we will definitely be looking over those. But I hope that everybody has a wonderful weekend and stay tuned for future virtual workshops in the future, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.